Welcome to the Get Over Yourself podcast. This is author and athlete Brad Kearns discovering ways to be healthy, fit, and happy in hectic, high-stress modern life. So let's slow down and take a deep breath, take a cold plunge, and expertly balance that competitive intensity with an appreciation of the journey. That's the theme of the show. Here we go. The Get Over Yourself podcast is brought to you by Almost Heaven, beautiful compact home use sauna kits, ancestral supplements, grass-fed organ meats in a capsule, DNA Fit, genetic testing for custom diet and exercise recommendations, Integro Health, high-potency liquid probiotic called Flourish, Organifi, organic powdered superfoods, delicious green, gold, and red powders, Wild Idea Buffalo, sustainable, grass-fed, beyond organic, real ketones, clean burning ketones for athletic performance and fat loss. And check out the bradkearns.com/shop page. That's my personal selection of favorite products for health, fitness, and peak performance. And here we go with the show.
Blue light is basically the color that we see at around noon. But if we're watching or looking at a screen at 9 o'clock at night, for example, it's the light, that spectrum of blue light that we get from our screens is telling our bodies it's 12 noon, it's 12 noon. So of course it's hard to go to sleep. Well, in the U.S. it used to be Oregon TILF was sort of the name for the certification. There were others as well, but there were sort of smaller third-party certifications for organic. But now, because organic in the U.S. has become a significant profitable portion of sales of food, the USDA, I think, kind of stepped in, and I think they've lowered the bar in order to let more people in. There's one more aspect of Europe that we don't quite have as well here, except for certain cities, which is public transportation. So, for example, if you live in the suburbs of a city such as Bordeaux or Bern or, Paris, you can get into the center on either streetcar or bus or subway, the metro. It's really, in Europe, they're connected by train and bus and trams. So that's very different here. In the U.S., you have to kind of get in your car to go anywhere unless you're willing to walk, 45 minutes to the grocery store, which that's a tough one. People are definitely strapped for time here, so.
Here's a wild idea. How about eating some good, clean, delicious, sustainably raised meat instead of the nasty, trashy feedlot animals? The vast majority of our meat consumption. No wonder there's vegetarians and vegans out there. But look, Wild Idea Buffalo is 100% grass-fed and finished meat. They roam on the open range as they have been for 130,000 years. This wonderful company is doing the best they can to give these animals a good life, harvest them in a humane manner. Check this out. 40 million cattle are slaughtered every year and pushed into the mainstream food supply. You've read books like Fast Food Nation with the disastrous health impact and consequences of this mess. And then, by contrast, 60,000 buffalo a year are harvested. Much more nutritional value, much better feeling deep inside when you order quality meat. Go to wildidea.com, order direct. They'll ship it to your house. It's delicious. You'll be a convert right away. There's nothing in the world like Buffalo Burger. Fantastic. Try it. Hi, listeners. Enjoy my wonderful conversation with Bordeaux Kitchen author Tania Teschke. I was so glad to meet with her in person after working with her for quite a long time remotely from her base in Switzerland. She finally got this incredible book done. It's an absolute masterpiece. It is the most comprehensively researched and presented book we've ever published at Primal Blueprint Publishing. It started out as 1,000 pages. We cut it down to 600 and something, but it's a comprehensive cultural immersion into French cooking, living, and wine like something you can never imagine, with all the recipes and the descriptions and the preparations and the weaving in of the culture and the traditions in France, and why the French paradox is nonsense. The French paradox is that they have low rates of heart disease despite eating this rich diet. And the revelation here is it's not a paradox. It could be one of the causes of the longevity of the French and their total enjoyment of food and culture and shopping at the farmers markets and preparing fresh meals, enjoying them in a social setting that's calm and relaxed, and all the things that we're missing out with fast-paced Western culture. So our show definitely gets into that theme hard because it's fascinating to me to capture some of the other cultures around the world that have not yet plunged headlong into this disastrous tech addiction, fast food consumerism culture that's run amok in the United States. And this is Tania's first visit back in a while, and she's getting a little bit of culture shock. Obviously, born and raised in America, but then living overseas in places like Japan, Russia, and now Switzerland for many years, raising her children overseas. So we talk about the differences in child rearing from some European traditions and what's going on in America today, also the dietary habits. And this girl's been on such an amazing journey, a quest to regain her own health after some serious health challenges, including a disastrous burst appendix that happened in, of all places, Kazakhstan, where she had to be flown emergency manner over to Germany, and then had numerous complications, was in the hospital for weeks in Germany, trying to survive this terrible ordeal, but looking into all types of alternative health practices due to her own health journey. And these things have informed her message and her book so wonderfully. And she was on the midst of a West Coast book tour, so she's going for it and has organized some wonderful events in Los Angeles, San Francisco. She had a great event in New York City. So if you're interested in ancestral health and upping your game and understanding about the beautiful French cultural traditions of wine and food, grab this book. You will absolutely not be disappointed. 5-star reviews abound because it's impossible not to give it a 5-star review when you see what it's all about. And I think you'll enjoy our wide-ranging conversation with Tania Teschke, coming all the way from Bern, Switzerland, to the Get Over Yourself studios in Sacramento. Tania Teschke, jet-lagged, but here with a smile. Thank you for coming across the world to, just for the podcast and some other stuff, like a fabulous book tour for the Bordeaux Kitchen.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for inviting me.
How has this whirlwind journey gone since the book's published? Then the real work started. You had to start promoting it. Tell us about the book tour and what's up.
Well, I just got in a couple nights ago to California, and I've got...
You live in Switzerland.
I live in Switzerland.
You're American born and raised, and been over there with your kids and getting it. We're going to talk about this later, about the juxtaposition between the disastrous modern consequences of good old American living and some of the traditions and the Europeans that are raising their kids in a more favorable manner, enjoying a more balanced lifestyle. But right now you came from Switzerland over here to promote this beautiful book.
Yeah, well, my dad lives in California, so I wanted to see him. And so I was starting here in San Francisco in a couple of days and appealing to the foodies of California. And then I'll go on to Los Angeles and after that to Seattle. So that's my plan. And in the meantime, seeing old friends and making new ones, hopefully, and, promoting the book and hoping that it'll interest people and also help them on their health journey the way it's helped me.
Right. So it's the Bordeaux Kitchen. The subtitle is An Immersion into French Food and Wine Inspired by Ancestral Traditions. I had to lean over and read that, even though we worked through that subtitle so hard, every word of it, trying to get exactly what this book captured. But it's so interesting because it's way more than a French cookbook. We looked on Amazon today and saw 100 such cookbooks where they're just giving you the recipes. But this thing is a health journey, an education. It's got everything. And I have to say, we've been publishing books, Primal, for 10 years. And this one is by far the most comprehensive and absolutely your life's work coming into these pages. I think it was, we started with like 1,000 pages, right? And we cut it down with painstakingly cut it down to 600 and something, right?
Yeah, we cut it down a little bit, but it's good. It's good. It's big enough and has kind of the paleo, primal, ancestral primer for those who don't know it yet. But, it's that kind of added to its length. But, people need to know. And I've tried to write it in such a way that I'm hopefully convincing people that, looking back to our ancestors is a good approach to our modern way of eating rather than the processed foods. And
this show is sponsored by In-N-Out Burger and Taco Bell, the 2-for-1 special if you mention the Get Over Yourself podcast. Right. And it just so happens that you're deeply immersed into the paleo scene. You're on your own health journey. We'll talk about that a little bit too, but it happens that traditional French culture and cooking is tightly aligned with all the principles that we're spouting, I guess most all of them, in the ancestral movement.
Yeah, they really, really are. It's amazing if you kind of break down, and it's not just the French. That happens to be the culture that I connected with, but so many traditional cultures really they use the natural products, the pork lard, or eat the organ meats, and but I happen to be in France for a few years, and I'm kind of a Francophile because I've spent time previously as a student and working there and that kind of thing. But the French traditions really touched me at the same time that I was learning about the ancestral lifestyle, or kind of going back to how people used to prepare foods and gather to eat, and the wine component too. It helps you slow down. It helps you just connect with others and celebrate the flavors and aromas and really, like I said, slow down, which is something that we're not doing right now in our modern lifestyle. Everything's just speeding up. And as I've, been trying to promote the book, I've noticed that, it just seems like maybe it's because I'm in this world now of social media and trying to, get people's attention. It's really a challenge. People are pulled in many directions, and it's there's a lot of competition for one's time and attention and concentration, and I think it's just getting harder, and we're moving further away from what our ancestors did, which was, just spend time together.
Yeah, I remember visiting my college roommate, Barbara Stein from Bordeaux, Switzerland. I was on, European trip from racing triathlons, and she said, "Come see me anytime." We were roommates at UC Santa Barbara, just some random European exchange student. And turns out she had a pretty nice place there for me to stay and hang out for several days. But it was amazing because come 5 or 6 o'clock, or whenever the people got off work, we went down to the town, I guess you would call it the hall or the pub, where they served dinner and also alcohol. And we ate and we sat around and talked and had something else, and then had something to drink. And it seemed like the whole village was there from 5:45 to 10:45 p.m. Like it was just a routine part of life that they hung out and visited and socialized. And my gosh, we have so much brain research and psychological well-being studies showing that this is just a fabulous way to live your life. It promotes happiness and fulfillment and all these great things that we seem to be missing out on with the digital age. Now, I wonder, that was 30 years ago. Hey, Barbara, if you're listening, I haven't seen you in a while. But what about now? Are you saying that, let's say in France or Switzerland, how do they score if you're on a 1 through 100 scale, and US is, what's the US now, like a 33, or I don't know, something disgraceful really with the tech addiction and the, prevalence of all the junk food. How's Europe doing right now in 2018?
Well, that's a great question because, more and more, it seems like that Europe is kind of following in the U.S. footsteps of just everything's faster, fast food, eating on the run.
Is it true you can get a Facebook account if you're European, or is that just, oh, wait. Oh, you can. An iPhone? Oh my gosh. We're exporting everything.
Yeah. Well, and they're really into actually the Europeans had the cell phones before.
Oh, that's right.
We did. The Americans did.
Yeah.
But it's, gosh, the scorecard. Well, I have to say that I haven't been back long in the U.S., but I've already seen kind of the higher prevalence of obesity and things like that. And so Europe is still behind in that, or ahead, if you want to look at it that way. And, the traditions are still there. The architecture is there. The bells in the churches, they ring. I actually missed that already. And, the lifestyle, it's starting to change, and you can get lots of fast food at the grocery stores in Switzerland or France. But there's still that construct, or that, I don't know, what do you call it? Infrastructure of a traditional lifestyle. And on Sundays, everything's closed. You don't shop at the mall on Sundays. You can shop at IKEA, on Saturdays, but then they close at whatever time, 5 or 6, and that's it. You sort of plan your life, knowing that Sundays you're going to go walk up an Alp or something like that.
What about the siestas in the afternoon? Is that still a fixture?
Oh, well, in countries, in the more southerly countries like Spain, yes, I think they have the siestas. That's not really something so much in a place like France or Switzerland. So they're more, well, there's still kind of the weekend lunch at grandma's. That's definitely there. Family visits on the weekends. That's really important. So that's an institution that hasn't changed yet. And, all the bars and the quick shakes and things, it's not something that's come into the lifestyle in Europe as much. There are a few people, running around with
Das Cliff Bar, very good. You try this. It's so nutritious. Let's keep them out of there. Okay.
Yeah, let's keep them out of there. Yeah. They have some, and Starbucks is infiltrating, of course, but and all the other fast food places. Not all of them, a few, but it's just a different. They kind of started from a different base. Like I said, the architecture and the cultural development.
So the Taco Bell doesn't fit in as well to that central square in Bern, Switzerland, as it does maybe in Elk Grove, California, the sprawling suburbs outside of Las Vegas or something. You just drop a Taco Bell in there. It looks like it's an authentic part of the native landscape.
Right. Well, and the strip malls, there are some. For example, just outside central Bordeaux, kind of old town Bordeaux, they have kind of strip mall type places, and it's pretty ugly. So, you have to, if you stay in the old towns, but they're everywhere in Europe, you get that romantic feeling of the architecture and the medieval buildings and that kind of thing. But there is people are on their cell phones, and, there is sort of progress, as you might say, in Europe. People are moving faster, but they still have, thankfully, a connection, to the past, whether they like it or not, which is something that just, in the U.S., we just don't have as long a history of, these distinct cultures, and it's a blend. It's a newer entity. So, it's easier to kind of go with the next new thing here. And that's a frustrating thing for entrepreneurs in Europe, where the regulations and the social norms and even the economy is set up somehow not as much for an entrepreneurial spirit. It's a little harder there. In the US, you just, I'll start a new business today and that's what I'm doing. So that's wonderful about the US, but it's just different here, and I don't know where we're going here in the US. It'd be interesting to see how things develop, but I just don't see people slowing down. I see things speeding up, and hoping that more people kind of catch on to and think about, taking the time, because I think really who suffers most are the younger generations, the little kids who are just getting some crackers before they go to school or whatever it is, a bowl of cereal and skim milk, when they really need when they really should be having eggs and bacon, in my opinion.
Yeah, and they're not involved in the meal preparation maybe as much. There's no family meal preparation anymore. Eric Schlosser, Fast Food Nation, great book that's now many years old, identified this, the rise of fast food in the 50s, destroyed one of the main fabrics of American culture, which was the family home-cooked and home-eaten meal together.
Yeah.
And the kids are side by side, understanding what healthy ingredients are and how to prepare a meal. And now it's just outsourced, because hardworking parents, double income with kids, DIWK, are going all day. No one really feels like taking an hour to make a meal when you can get in line for 7 minutes and bring it all home. And so, step by step, we're falling off into where today's kid has had an entire lifetime of fast food experience. And even, I was just saying this to someone about the Slurpee phenomenon, where we pounded a ton of Slurpees back in my day. We would ride our bikes around the San Fernando Valley in the hot summer sun, and then when we were hot and thirsty, we'd go get a Slurpee. But guess what? We went on our bicycles to get it and drink it and enjoy it, and then ride home up a really steep hill. So we knew that we're going to go get that Slurpee. We're going to pay the price coming home. Probably burned off all that sugar by the time we got home. And today, it's like the carpool stops off and gets the Slurpee or the Jamba Juice or whatever. Ooh, I said Slurpee and Jamba Juice in direct comparison. Imagine that. Sorry, Jamba Juice, but same amount of simple sugar grams in that dose. You're still dosing your kid with the same thing. So how old are your kids?
They're 12 and 10.
And they've been in Europe their whole lives?
Well, basically, we did a tour in Japan as well, which neither of them remember as much. They remember Moscow and Bordeaux.
Wow.
And then now
world travelers.
Switzerland. Yeah, it's nice that they were in Bordeaux at a time when they have still retained the French. In Russia, they were able to start speaking Russian, but they've forgotten it because they were just too small. So, and prior to that, we were in Japan, where my younger daughter was born, and neither of them really remember that. Just, we show them videos, but so yes, they've had wonderful, experience and exposure to other cultures, but they're very curious about American culture. And as I grew up in the US, so to me, it's not as interesting as exploring Europe, but for them, which I understand, they really want to get back to the US. So I have many, misgivings about it, hesitation. It's really scary for me to come back to this world of American, I don't know, what we do here. And so
Slurpees and social media. That's what we do for teenagers.
But, there's so many wonderful things about the United States. And of course, we want to show them the national parks and, the friendliness that abounds in the U.S. The Americans are always so friendly, and there's so many wonderful opportunities here. But there's also the darker side that, of course, I see as being kind of a worrywart all the time. The things that bother me, like the glyphosate issues and the SmartMeters, which are required on homes throughout the U.S. and and then the vaccine schedules, and it's just a lot of issues that maybe you can not think about them, but I happen to be one who does, especially, being so kind of obsessed about good health and good lifestyle and, that kind of thing.
So the glyphosate is commercially available as RoundUp, and therefore, because it's killing weeds in the fields, it's getting into our food supply. And this is a big concern of yours. And is this non-existent in Europe? Is it banned or something?
Well, it's allowed, and the EU is allowing it for a few more years, kind of shelving putting it off. I mean, unfortunately, Europe follows the US in a lot of policies that maybe they shouldn't just kind of say yes right away and follow. But it's all very complicated, and of course. But for the glyphosate, I think it's banned in Switzerland, but I still, purchase organic there only because things that are conventional are still sprayed with synthetic chemicals to a certain degree. So we try to, eat organic and grass-fed, and which is all available there, But as Joel Salatin says, there's industrial organic, and then there's, local farmer organic. So we buy our eggs from the little pastured hen farm nearby, where they have a little hut, and you go in on the honor system and buy your eggs and put the money in the little box.
The honor system.
It's really wonderful. Or you go to the farm and buy your milk. You bring your glass bottle and put in your francs, and then you get your
raw
milk.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
There was a lady at the local supermarket here in the United States pitching her raw milk. And it turns out she's from the farm, had driven 3.5 hours to set up her little stand on the aisle at this market and tried this raw milk. I'd never tried it in my life. I've only written about it for many years in all the books, like raw is a superior choice because of all the nutrition that is killed with the pasteurization process. Try to find it in your area. I'm like, good luck with that. Here I was drinking my first raw milk. It was delicious. I don't even drink milk. And I bought, the stuff from her and was making my smoothies with it. And
oh, nice.
It tastes different. The eggs taste so much different. And the bright colored yolk, to the extent that now, like, I'm becoming a Francophile. That's a nice, polite term for, extreme devotion to French culture. So now I'm the eggophile, where I really only like the pastured eggs, and there's a distinct drop down to the extent that I don't even feel like making an omelet with regular eggs. Once you've gone to that other side and tasted, huge difference. So when you have industrial organic, like USDA certified organic, green circle, familiar on all the labels, how is that comparing to your local farmer? How is the local farmer superior to that organic but mass-produced and mass-transported product?
Well, in the U.S., it used to be Oregon Tilth, was sort of the name for the certification. There were others as well, but there were sort of smaller third-party certification for organic. Excuse me. And, but now, because organic in the U.S. has become a significant profitable portion of sales of food, the USDA, I think, kind of stepped in. And I think I haven't read all the regulations of what it takes to be organic under USDA, but it's not the same as Oregon Tilth. I think they've lowered the bar in order to let more people in. So, it's
What's
not...
Tilth stand for?
I don't know if it was the location. I
know MILF, Oregon MILF is one thing, but Oregon Tilth is different.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just the name. I don't know if it's
Sorry,
acronym.
People, you're on the Get Over Yourself podcast. There are going to be occasional jokes going, whether it's over your head or not, that's fine.
Okay, it might be over my head.
I know some Oregon MILFs, but I don't know. Oregon Tilth, yeah, I've heard of that and seen that here and there. So you're saying that predates or is more refined and sophisticated than USDA certified organic?
Yeah, definitely higher standard and very much predates USDA. In fact, I don't even see Oregon Tilth anymore. I think they probably either they killed it or kind of took over.
Probably still in Portland. I don't know, Brian, you're mastering the recording. Tell us, go look in that label. But I'm aware that an organic animal with the organic stamp is mandated that they ate organic feed, which is a lot different than, going out and being a pure pasture-raised animal.
Well, that's right. That's probably the biggest
I guess that's
difference.
For the eggs too. And so when you get a pastured egg from a farm, that chicken most likely ate some worms, some grass, had a varied diet, high omega-3 diet, is spitting out an egg with all that good stuff in it. Whereas the organic egg maybe just ate organic feed. And I know they have,
right on.
They're supposed to have access to pasture, which in some cases could be a little door in a giant coop, right? So they're not really a pastured animal.
That's cage-free, I think.
Right, cage-free. They haven't. There's a door over there if you guys want to go exercise.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
Yeah,
unfortunately, yeah. And there are a few for eggs. It's very confusing, I think, because in the U.S. there are many different, labels that they use. And actually, Diana Rogers has done a great job of, she's a farmer herself, and she talks about the differences and. I think if you go with pastured, that means pastured usually, that yes, they had some worms and they were out in a pasture. And going back to Joel Salatin, the farmer, he will move his cows from paddock to paddock and follow a couple of days later with the chickens, and they eat, the worms and everything that are in the poop. And it's a great cycle. They kind of, this is how the soil regenerates and the pastures regenerate. You have the cows there, then you move them on elsewhere so the grass can regenerate. And you have the chickens who are all happy about the little worms left behind or growing, and in the poop and makes for great eggs.
And in your environment, in general in Europe, are these much easier to find? Are they consumed at a higher level than here?
Well, I would say, especially in Switzerland, where they kind of, the government subsidizes the farmers to keep to really steward the landscape and to keep the landscape where it's pasture land, and where you do see cows and you do see the farms. They're all over, really, in the countryside.
So they subsidize all farming activity to make sure that it doesn't become industrialized like we might think in America?
Well, there is of course some industrial farming, but at least the organic farmers are subsidized. I can't say for 100% sure. I think also non-organic are subsidized to a certain degree so that they can carry on this, business that otherwise would just be, it would deteriorate. And in terms of industrial organic in Switzerland, for example, it's, there are two competing large grocery chain stores, and then they'll have their farmers who contribute to the milk and the sour cream and all those, dairy products, as well as the meats and the eggs, actually. So as for France, trying to think, there are a lot of local farmers. You can, there are markets there. This is what's wonderful. Even in Switzerland too, there are markets in the towns, but in what's so wonderful about France are these farmers markets, as we call them in the U.S. They have them, during the week, and then on the weekends, depending on where you are, or if it's a larger city, they'll have them in different places. And you can, get to know, it's either farmers or it's vendors who have gone to farms, but not all of them are organic. Some of them might be industrial, but if you go to a market, you have more chances of getting non-industrial with or without organic, because they're just trying to sell they don't have a grocery store that they're connected with. So they're just selling their small farm vegetables and eggs and meats.
I'm wondering about the average citizen, because here in America, whatever city, if you're listening in St. Louis or Sacramento or New York City or LA or Corpus Christi, Texas, or anywhere, you can do a fabulous job as a huge enthusiast, right? You can order your salmon eggs over the internet, and your wild idea buffalo will ship anywhere in the freezer packs, and have all kinds of delicious foods that you can eat from the finest quality meats wherever you live.
Yeah. Well,
now, can you identify the average person? Because here, the average person is so far removed. They think the buffalo's the animal on the nickel, and they have no exposure to the distinct offerings of even a farmer's market they probably drive by, but they're used to consuming a lot of fast food, or if they do go to the market, they're getting the best of the mass-produced. And I know we have more population here than Switzerland, so some of this is going to be tough, but I think we're talking about a small segment of, here in America, a small segment of society is really on their game, and they're doing better than we ever have in terms of dietary quality and distinctive, looking for the dark chocolate that's, cacao beans is the first ingredient, and staying away from this. So we have like that, however many % of people doing that, but then the average is so dismal. And even in the impoverished areas, it's been identified, like they don't even have access to vegetables. They can't even find them if they wanted to in their community. So if we go take that average over to France, Switzerland, maybe even an urban environment that's mixed socioeconomic, how do those people do?
Well, part of it is location. If you're in the cities, you have access to a market, and in Bern, where we live, which is the capital of Switzerland, there's a market every day in the center, vegetables and that kind of thing. So for city dwellers have access to market almost daily in Switzerland. You could probably say the same thing for most towns in France. Cities, maybe a few times a week they have markets. Smaller towns, it might just be once or twice. But the average citizen, I think, kind of does rely on markets, the farmers' markets, still to a degree, and much more so than here in the U.S. Though I would say, yes, 2018, people are used to the bigger grocery stores. It's convenient. Everything's in one place. So there's definitely a shift to convenience, efficiency. Definitely not, it's not a happiness factor. And as I write in the book, my trips to the grocery store by car were just, I would come back feeling exhausted and, unfulfilled with a full, cartload of groceries, but just not feeling that great about having, taken the car. And I would say, in the countryside, people they live on a farm then, so they're eating at least a certain portion of their food from their farm. In the suburbs, I would say that's maybe the hardest thing, because there might not necessarily be a market. The suburbs are closer to land that is commercialized, where they set up, the grocery stores, the industrial, grocery stores. But there's one more aspect of Europe that we don't quite have as well here, except for certain cities, which is public transportation. So, for example, if you live in the suburbs of a city such as Bordeaux or Bern or Paris, you can get into the center on either streetcar or bus or subway, the metro. It's really, in Europe, I mean, they're connected by train and bus and trams. So that's very different here. In the US, you have to kind of get in your car to go anywhere unless you're willing to walk, 45 minutes to the grocery store, which that's a tough one. People are definitely, strapped for time here. So as everywhere, but it needs to be convenient. And the most convenient thing is the car in the US, really. That's how unless you live in New York City, which is a great thing about New York, is the subway. But, that's just not the same America as the rest of America. So that's one big difference I see for sure.
So kids, preteen kids here, we kind of have a sense of their experience. They're starting to engage deeper and deeper into social media, sometimes with profound negative effects. They're not exercising much. We have studies from the Kaiser Family Foundation identifying that the average kid of that age is engaging with a screen 6 point something hours per day. We have a failure rate for a basic fitness competency test in California, arguably one of the more progressive and healthy and good weather states. 40% of the kids fail to complete a mile run in a pretty modest time. Like, in other words, they can't even jog for a mile. They have to walk, and they fail this performance standard on the standardized test. What about in Europe? What are your kids getting that you feel is maybe superior from the average American experience? And what are the kids like too?
Well, in our neighborhood, we're in kind of a suburb of the capital. Little kids walk to school by themselves.
Themselves.
I mean, little. We're
like
talking
kindergarten, first grade?
Kindergarten, wow. Yeah.
Do they have ankle bracelets on for their parents to track them or not?
They have big orange vests on so you can see them when they cross the street.
Oh, that's so cute.
And, usually they're not by themselves. They're with a sibling or a little pack of 3 or 4. If they're a little bit bigger, say, 4th grade, 6th grade, whatever, they're riding their bikes or they're on their scooters. No parents. I don't know where the parents are there, but they're not walking their kids to school. So that's.
Oh, pause. So the video cut out, Brian. So we'll just smoothly come back in. You were saying about the kids are walking to school. So you talked about the big kids, the parents are not around, and then you can keep going.
Okay. So yeah, and our children go to an international school. So the kids there are, from all over the place. There are very few Swiss children. But I'm always trying to ask, what are the other kids eating for breakfast? I'm just curious, that
Pop-Tarts, of course.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, a lot of them are eating, just a quick thing. I don't know, granola bar or cereal or whatever. I try to feed my girls the bacon and eggs in the morning, or liverwurst, or something solid that carries them through, and they don't even need that mid-morning snack. That is figured in. It's scheduled into the school day.
Well, we've called it nutrition here forever. It was called nutrition period. I don't know if every state the listeners can reference, but in California, when I grew up in elementary school, we had nutrition at 10, and then we had lunch at 12 or whatever.
Huh.
To get almost zero nutrition, reflecting now on what we were eating, but it was a nice try.
Well, so they, the kids, they have their snack, and then the lunch, of course, the school would like to make sure that the cafeteria stays in business. But to be honest, I send my girls to school with home lunches because otherwise it's too expensive. And, I know what I'm giving them. I'm giving them grass-fed beef, for their lunch, which will carry them through until, later in the day, till they get back home. And
how about you told me offline about their outdoor experience, and they're kind of distinct from the high engagement of screen here. You're sending them out to Well, did they come to you and they say they were bored and you said, go outside and that solves the problem? Something like that. You told me. It was brilliant.
Well, I guess our, what we do is we have our 10 minutes a day. So they can do their 10 minutes on their iPads.
10 minutes of screen a day.
10 minutes.
Wow, that's tight, man. Love it.
But it turns inevitably into 15 or 20 and sometimes a half an hour. But, compared to the statistics that I've seen, it's still, and they're checking their email, they're playing a couple of games or something like that. And then, though my older daughter has more and more homework online, which drives me nuts. I'd rather just have her write it down. But I understand, that everyone thinks they need to, keep up and learn. And meanwhile, I didn't see a computer screen till 6th grade, the first Apple, computers. And I don't know. I think they learn better. Well, and we're learning more about the blue light, how it's just absolutely ravaging the eyes. And for children, I just, it's a longer time in front of the screen over a lifetime that's, leading to.
Oh, mercy. I never thought about that. It's like, we know that if you live 70 or 75 or 80 years, you're going to get the cataracts just from exposure to light over a lifetime, right? And now we're accelerating that to, we're probably going to see cataracts in today's children when they're 40 or 45 because of the intensity and the frequency of their light exposure is 2, 3, 4 times as much as someone who grew up in, with sunlight and a little bit of evening screen use.
Yeah.
But no computers until you were in 6th grade or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and macular degeneration is just skyrocketing, apparently. I've been listening to some, eye doctors talk about this. And so there are a lot of issues, not to mention the disruption of circadian rhythm, especially if kids are watching television at night and they're, buzzed and wide awake when they're supposed to go to sleep, not getting enough sleep and that whole.
So we always hear this term blue light. Do you have can you explain that for the lay person?
Oh gosh. Well, the blue light, it's the blue light is basically the color that we see at around noon. But if we're watching or looking at a screen at 9 o'clock at night, for example, the light, that spectrum of blue light that we get from our screens is telling our bodies it's 12 noon, it's 12 noon. So of course it's hard to go to sleep. There's there's a lot about quantum physics that I don't understand and light spectrums. But as a photographer, I do understand that there are different colors of light. And, I tried to be conscious of that when I photographed for the book. But, we evolved in sunlight and we kind of.
Right.
Well, right. And we don't.
And firelight and candlelight, which is the orange or the red light on the UV spectrum. So the blue it's not blue when we go out and look at the midday sun. It looks white, right? But it's called blue, and you can reference the sky being blue because that's how the, let's see, I don't want to butcher this for the science, but the sky is made blue because of the blue light spectrum coming from the sun. And I guess that's a good way to
there's something about
realize that it actually it's blue. But indoors, when we turn on a light bulb or a screen, it's not blue light bulbs. They're white light bulbs, but they're emitting what we're going to call blue light. So hopefully you can reference that. And then your comment that the screen is like the midday sun, they can measure this, like the intensity of the light experience is like midday sun.
Yeah.
And therefore it's triggering your genes and hormones to think that it's midday. And so the kids are wired when they go to sleep.
Well, and we used to
have... And the humans, the adults.
Right. And we used to have tungsten light bulbs, and I think they need to bring those back, which is just, the light bulb that has kind of an orange glow.
Just so the old time round light bulb that's now been replaced with the swirly ice cream cone.
Yes.
Tell me the difference.
Well, there are a lot of differences, and trying to keep them all straight. But the tungsten is sort of it's an orangey glow, whereas these sort of ice cream swirl new Fandango light bulbs have, I believe some of them have certain gases in them that are really poisonous if it breaks. But some of these are LED, light emitting diodes. So they're actually, you can't see it, but they're flickering. They're flickering too fast for us to actually visually see, but the brain sees it, if you will. And, some people's brains can't handle that. And like a lot of the hyperactivity comes from fluorescent lights and LEDs that are, flickering. And it's just too much. It's too much for the brain, and unfortunately, a lot of people, you don't notice it, and it's kind of something that affects your eyesight over time. And then things that are really not normal seem normal because they're so common. Poor eyesight, myopia, the eyes elongating to try to make up for all the weird light signals that we're sending to our eyes. So that's something, and actually someone who's really into this quantum physics and thinks our health is deteriorating because of our lack of sunlight is a neurosurgeon named Dr. Jack Kruse, who's very interesting to listen to and probably quite, I think, controversial, but very, very interesting. And he has some interesting messages about light. And, everyone wears sunglasses. You go outside, you put on sunglasses, you're never really getting any light in your eyes, except for that blue light, that's 12 noon light. So anyway, I try to limit the time on the screens. And of course, meanwhile, I'm saying, get off your screen, and I'm, working on my screen to get this book out. So that's really tough for them to come to terms with, and for me too,
Yeah, I made a joke on another podcast where I said, I'm really strict about this. And every night at 10 o'clock, I text my kids to get off their screens, right? So, because we do so much texting in the house now, and the doors are closed. People are engaged with their own screens. We're losing that aspect of family time as well. Yeah.
And no screens at the table. I mean, no nothing at the table when we're eating.
Right.
It's just
so those
the food.
Those nice built-in rules, right?
Yeah.
So the part about the sunglasses being an objection as well, the way I understand it is, especially first thing in the morning, the sun's not too intense where it's going to mess you up if you have indirect exposure. Obviously, you don't want to look at the sun ever, listeners. Remember that. But if you expose your eyeballs directly to sun in the morning, that is a nice setup of your circadian rhythm, triggering the proper hormone flow and the serotonin spike and all that great stuff. And that is setting you up for a peaceful evening of sleep that night because you exposed yourself to direct sun. But if you're doing the sunglasses, the subway, and then into the workplace, you're missing that opportunity. And therefore you're not getting the right signals and then the right hormone flow in the evening because you've just been blasted with this steady source of indoor light.
Yeah.
So especially with the kids after dark, I imagine that 10 minutes of screen that you allow is sometime before dark.
Yeah, it's right after school. They have their snack, then they do their 10 minutes.
And it drags into 22. They can watch one Netflix episode without commercials of a sitcom. So there you go.
And then they go off to do their homework. And my girls love to read books, not Kindle or anything, just a real book in the hand. So they do that. They could get a lot more outdoor time. I wish they would. Sometimes I send them out to the trampoline.
Burn some energy.
Yeah.
Love that. I had a trampoline growing up in my backyard, and it was the centerpiece of the culture, the community, the friends. We were out there all the time. It was just the greatest toy ever. A few injuries and all that, but we didn't have the net around it like today's trampoline. Right. It was dug into the ground, and you just jumped on that thing. We tried to jump over a high jump bar, and crazy times. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so ours has a net, of course. But yeah, it's just, it's hard to even, it's hard to get kids outside. We're lucky enough to have a garden, and sometimes we can convince them in the summer to help pick some berries and their berries. But I think, getting that morning light, that's something that also Dr. Jack Kruse talks about, really, that it's the particular colors, the purple and the red light of the morning, and then at sunset, that make I'm not sure what it is exactly, something in the mitochondria, the DNA, the things spin faster, almost like kind of having this anti-aging effect. Whereas, light, when it hits us, and all matter is light slowed down. So if we're really just light and energy slowed down.
We're swirling massive atoms, according to Deepak Chopra.
Right.
We're not physical beings.
Well,
right.
he's right in a way that, we're light slowed down. I don't know how else to explain it, but there are certain spectrums, like I said, or parts of the spectrum, the red and the purple light that hit us and that make everything spin faster. And when you don't have that, you age faster. So it's kind of the opposite. It's a little bit confusing. I have to listen over and over again to these theories, but there is something to it. I think, we're not really getting, and grounding to the ground, really getting your feet in the grass when it's moist and letting the negative electrons from the earth pass through us. That's
same with fresh air versus stale air.
Yeah.
The negative ions are energized molecular particles in the air, and they're emanating from the earth. The earth is magnetized, and it's dispensing energy into your bare feet. If you have shoes on or you're walking on cement, you're not getting it.
right.
They call it earthing.
Yeah.
But also I'm fascinated by the concept of the fresh air being highly energized with negative ions, negative being the chemical term, but a very positive thing, right?
Yeah.
So negative ions are the ones full of energy, and then positive ions are what are found in tightly enclosed metal spaces, such as a car, airplane, space capsule, internal office environment. And so the air is literally devoid of energy compared to fresh air. So when you're out especially by a large body of water, in the mountains, when it's windy, these are the most energized places on Earth, vis-a-vis the places that have the least energy, including pollution in an urban environment has de-energized air. So you can get these negative ion generating air filters and put one in your room and get the benefit of that energized air from artificially, but it's still exactly the same chemically as the fresh air outside. So everyone go out there and get an air purifier that has an ionizer attached to it, and then you're going to improve your situation. And this came about because the astronauts were training in the space capsule, the early astronauts, and they'd become inexplicably fatigued after a short time inside the enclosed metal space, even though the air was being pumped in, whatever. And they finally realized that it was the molecular composition of the air because of the metal enclosure. And so they installed these ionizing machines, and the problem was solved. And that's where they first discovered the dangers. We don't even, talk about this stuff when we're building subways and selling people cars and building a brand new office building with the wonderful conditioned air that you can't even open the windows in most buildings or hotels.
Right. No, that's true. Well, and also with the astronauts, how many times a day are they seeing the sunrise and the sunset? Too many. So they are just, they've accelerated their aging. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we did not evolve in space. We evolved on the Earth, which has a certain, the 24-hour cycle. And so I can see
Jet
how they
lag.
come back.
Yeah.
Jet lag. Yeah. Well, and something else Dr. Jack Kruse talks about is he thinks, something like obesity is really a function of not getting the right amount and the right type of light into the eye, because that's where it all starts. It's in the eye, and that sends it starts the cascade of hormonal messaging. which, is very interesting because we do spend all our time either in front of these blue light screens or with sunglasses outside, or we're just inside all day. So we're not getting the light and we're not getting those signals. And so one thing, I talk about in the book is that how people go to the markets or on foot or on bike, they're outside. They have small refrigerators. They need to get outside, small, usually smaller apartments. People are really social. They get out, they're outside. So, there's something to that, eating al fresco, eating outside, outdoors, grounding, that whole community exchange, walking to and from or biking to and from the market. And these are all things that we might not do if we have the convenience of a car and a big store, that you drive to, and with the artificial lights, beaming into your eyes. So there are those kinds of differences that, we don't really think about here in the U.S. as much.
Yeah, the light thing is interesting. I'm thinking of the incredible book, Lights Out, Sleep, Sugar, and Survival. And they're talking about this constant exposure to light and prolonged days that are lit up because the blue light indoors from the light bulb and the screen is akin to sunlight. So we are in modern life making an endless summer in terms of our genetic signaling. So we always think it's summer, no matter where we live, especially in the high latitudes where you're getting home from work and it's getting dark at 4:15 in Stockholm, and then you're lit up all night playing with the screen and doing whatever. So if it's always summer, our historical genetic experience is to binge on sugar, the ripened berries of the time, and fatten up for the winter. This is a genetically optimal, hardwired into our genes because of the difficult long winters where there's not enough food. We want to have an extra layer of body fat, and then humans would generally lose that when the weather changed and all that. We'd slow down in the winter and get fat and sit around. And so now we're that way all the time. It's endless summer, endless cravings for sugar. We know from sleep research that the messing up the sleep hormones and getting sleep deficient is going to spike the appetite hormones and dysregulate the fat burning and fat storage hormones to the extent that you're going to crave sugar and store it as fat. So I think that's what Jack Kruse is on to, and many others identifying these problems that have nothing to do with your willpower and your discipline, and you shouldn't eat after dark. And it seems like this conversation is going in the direction of like, we have to purposely de-tech ourselves or de-efficientize our experience. And Europe's behind in that way. So they're way ass healthier than us because they have to ride their bike to the market and go buy another green pepper tomorrow because they didn't go to Costco and get 6 of them in a shrink wrap thing that came from Chile in February to North America.
Right. Yeah.
So we got to go backwards. We got to go back to Europe and regain our health in a backwards direction. Wow. So the book is sitting here in between us. We haven't opened it up and dug deep into it yet. But what's cool is you get many of these points across about the return to ancestral traditions, especially when it comes to cooking and wine and all that kind of thing. But you talk about your health struggles, your health journey, your increasing awareness in the midst of this French cooking immersion.
Yeah. So that's, I'm trying to take people on the journey with me. I know a lot of people have health struggles of their own, and I'm hoping that this will help maybe reveal to people some ideas, some concepts and hacks of how to, improve their health. The
hack is to slow down. The antithesis of the word hack, right? A hack is a shortcut or optimization, but that's the ultimate hack is slow down.
Slow down and do it yourself, and find the joy in cooking, if possible, when possible. It really is a pleasure if you're feeding, your family, and it's good for them, and you source the ingredients, and even if it's only once a week, and you kind of prepare meals for the rest of the week. Though I don't do that necessarily, but because I like to use fresh ingredients, but something about flavor is also that I talk about is using fresh ingredients, using the right tools. A concept that the French use is called terroir, about local. You could translate it as sort of local flavor. Every wine and every cheese comes from a certain place and tastes the way it does because of where it's from, whether it's the altitude, the climate, the soil, the microbiome of the soil, the latitude, especially for wine. Wine really grows in certain latitudes of the northern and southern hemispheres. I think that's catching on in the U.S. is sort of local flavor, artisanal cheeses, dairy, for example.
Chocolate too. I went on the Theo right. chocolate tour, and they say that the beans take a flavor of pineapple, from the tropical environment or whatever. There's an influence from the soil, and every batch is different and all that wild stuff. Definitely. And again, a lot of the people in the sort of ancestral health realm talk about the microbiome, and we have microbiome everywhere, as it turns out, in our gums and our brains and on our skin, and not just in the gut. Oh, right. The bacteria is mostly in the gut, and we hear about the 12 trillion cells of bacteria in our gut, but it's in the brain and throughout the body as well. Yeah. And I think also, we don't like to think of it this way, but we're exposed to viruses and parasites and all sorts of things all the time. And it depends on how healthy your microbiome is in all of these places that you can ward off disease or not. And again, with processed foods, there's no living. You frowned when you said processed foods, Tania. I saw that. I know. Our YouTube viewers are going, she doesn't like processed foods. What's her problem? I think it's, the fresh ingredients, the real ingredients, things where you maybe have even talked to the farmer. These are the kinds of things, if you could get them into your life and into your kitchen, it's such a pleasure to use real products and not have to look at a label on something. That's just put the boxes away. One ingredient, it's prunes, or it's whatever it is, rice, if you're eating rice, or a sack of potatoes, or grass-fed beef, organ meats. These are sort of the things that I talk about, and I've divided my book into different chapters on each kind of meat, how to prepare pork in different ways, offal, the organ meats, beef, lamb, and there is a chapter on vegetables and, of course, desserts, which everyone likes. You got to have dessert. The insight about the French culture is they really enjoy and prioritize their eating. So when you're talking about a dessert, but it's a homemade preparation that you did with your children with love and laughter, and put the time and energy into it. You went down to the farmer's market to buy the fresh lemons to make the lemon meringue pie. And there's a bunch of sugar in it, and it's going to bump you out of keto and all that terrible stuff. But now we're starting to, I feel like we're backpedaling from this intense battle where we're shouting down the naysayers and battling with fists clenched against the vegans because they're so wrong and we're so right. And I think we're all taking a few steps backward and trying to get more reasonable and say, hey, enjoy your mealtime. If it's going to be dessert, make it count. Don't wolf something down, a drumstick from the frozen package at 7-Eleven. But if you're going to go make some dessert, look in the book, try some of that stuff. It's pretty darn good. We had some dessert, didn't we, before we began the podcast in the morning hours? I had some of my chocolate mousse. It was fabulous.
It was fabulous.
Yeah.
With that whipped cream, that's
cranking. Thumbs up all around. I don't care if you're, I mean, it was keto approved. It happened to be, so you can make some good choices too if you're big on this. But I think the bigger insight I wanted to point out is like, these people know how to live that are food enthusiasts, and that's probably getting them past the negative aspects of consuming that bread with the freshest, purest olive oil and balsamic vinegar that they're dipping it in, right?
Well, I in the book, the recipes that I have for desserts, for example, are actually low sugar for the most part, or you can try your other sweeteners. But it's if the meal is rich enough, whether it's the dessert or the main course, with enough good fats, not the hydrogenated or the ultra processed vegetable oils. If you've got your good traditional fats, and I'm talking tallow, lard, butter, goose fat, and duck fat. Duck fat's huge in the southwest of France, and delicious. These are the things that will satisfy you. Use them in the desserts, and then you don't need all the sugar, or use them in the main course and the desserts. But you'd need, less food. You just eat less but more high quality foods that are really rich, like your chocolate mousse from this morning. That was very rich, and you can't eat that much of it, and there was no sugar in it even. It's the richness of these fats too, and I go into this at length in the book. That's what satisfies. If you're not corrupted by the frown processed foods, your palate will just really enjoy the richness. And that's, I talk about that with the French paradox. It's not really a paradox, is it?
Because the French paradox being that they have lowest rates of heart disease, but have among the highest fat intake in the diet, but it's identified as nutritious natural fats.
Right. Well, but that's not a paradox, as you were saying. It's an advantage. It's because...
Right, we're going to rename it right now. I mean, the French paradox is it's kind of like a medical term or a scientific phenomenon, right? It's a real thing that people keep talking about.
It was called out, coined in a study.
Right. So we're renaming that sheet right now on this show. It's the French advantage.
It's the French advantage.
They eat more fat. What do you say to the objectioners that don't want you eating that fat because it's going to cause heart disease? I mean, I'm sure you encounter that, especially in Europe and wherever else.
Yeah, that's really tough, because we have been conditioned over decades to believe that the fat is bad, and high cholesterol and all these issues that,
especially duck fat. That's disgusting. I mean,
it's fabulous.
Until you try it, right?
And all that butter. God, do your eggs in butter, and wow, that is just the best. And grass-fed butter, if possible. But
not a little butter, like a substantial amount, to where the egg tastes
like butter.
Better than, I mean, I've been doing that lately, where I'm just throwing a little more on, and it makes a big difference. And it's so satisfying, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's a big difference.
Satisfying.
Yeah.
And a little bit of salt, sea salt or Himalayan salt. I mean, it's so satisfying. You just go through your morning and you think, it's lunchtime, rather than an hour later just scrounging for something, after you've had your little handful of granola or
cottage cheese with blueberries on top, or yogurt, or what have you, with some orange juice. And
I know people think that they're doing themselves a service by having the low fat and a few of those blueberries. And I just feel like, give it a try. I mean, all you can do, you can't really change people's opinion. You can give them the facts, the research, but, I can say from my family's point of view, for example, it's just anecdotal, but, and we started to really cut out the sugars and the more refined flours and processed things, that and adding in those fats, more butter, more duck fat, more lard, tallow, we were feeling better. My husband dropped about 10 pounds he didn't know he had. My girls were able to concentrate better at school. And there were fewer tantrums when we dropped the gluten for the younger one. It was a really, I think, a big issue, the processed, flours, baguettes in the morning and cereal. We've transitioned now to the bacon and eggs for the most part, or liverwurst in the mornings. And it's a really good start to the day. And, we feel satisfied. I feel much better. I used to eat one of those, I don't know, it was called Friends cereals, in grad school with rice milk. And I would come crashing down during my class and, my trade law class, and I would be falling asleep, not just because it was trade law, but because it was
because of the rice milk and the Friends.
Yeah. So it's a lot different when you have a really good meal that carries you through the night or through the morning or whatever.
Hold on. So you said give it a try in passing, and I think that's a profound suggestion, because we're exposed to so much information, wondering if this authority is credible or not. Yeah, I know you've done a ton of research, and we've talked so much about your study and your background. You're unbiased. I mean, you came into this from vegetarian world and health problems that made you go on this long journey of searching and exploring and testing out. So if we can encourage the listener to do that, wow, test out the book. You can pick and choose. I know it's 600 something pages, but it's easy to dive into how to cook the organ meat section, because I'm so intimidated by doing stuff like that. And I tried liver, it doesn't taste that good. But if we can figure out creative ways and get some competency there, wow.
Yeah.
Worthwhile.
Definitely. I think so. I try to make all the meats, and including the organ meats, approachable. And I
hopefully the animal's dead before you approach it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then it's approachable.
Well, that's a whole another issue of, the moral vegetarian versus, but I have to say that, there's also a chapter on butchery. I did a butchery apprenticeship, and when you're breaking down a carcass, you really understand respect for the animal, and you really want to try to use every piece of it, from the organs to the fat to every piece of meat, and even the bones, for your bone broth. It's really when you kind of really dig in with your hands and you really touch the meat, for example, or the organs, you realize, wow, this is the most nourishing stuff for me and my family, and this animal gave its life, and I don't want to waste, any bit of it. And I talk about that in the book too, about rendering your own fat and, just having that as a tool, the different fats that you can use for your cooking. But that's definitely something, respecting, by eating nose to tail, we're really respecting ourselves, our nutritional needs, and the life of the animal, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Brian McAndrew, the guy mastering this recording, said something similar on his podcast, where if you're going to take an animal's life, you better lead a purposeful and meaningful life yourself. Don't let it go to waste by sitting on the couch watching too much Netflix until midnight. Make it count and get some energy, go do something. Love that. So this feels like the conclusion of part 1 of 7 podcasts that we have with you. There's so many topics we could dig into, and I appreciate your insights, the cultural learnings of America and Europe from Tania. Good stuff. The book is the real deal. You have to go get this if you're interested in this ancestral living and French culture. The Bordeaux Kitchen, it's called. And good luck on your book tour, spreading the word. And we can also find you at taniateschke.com.
Yep, and BordeauxKitchen.com.
Oh, great. Okay. Thanks for talking.
Thanks.
Da, 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 da. Thank you for listening to the show. We would love your feedback at getoveryourselfpodcast@gmail.com. And we would also love if you could leave a rating and a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. I know it's a hassle. You have to go to desktop iTunes, click on the tab that says ratings and reviews, and then click to rate the show anywhere from 5 to 5 stars. And it really helps spread the word so more people can find the show and get over themselves because they need to. Thanks for doing it. This is Brad to talk about my favorite performance supplement, Real Ketones, makers of the most scientifically advanced, heavily researched supplemental ketone product in the world. Yes, you can now drink ketones, the same stuff that your liver makes from devoted ketogenic eating. Quickly get into ketosis and promote your athletic, weight loss, cognitive performance, and disease protection goals. I am calling this the greatest breakthrough in performance nutrition in decades. Ketones are a superior, cleaner burning fuel source than glucose. All those powdered, sugary gels and blocks we've been drinking, glucose produces 45 times more free radicals than ketones. So when you drink ketones, like I do before, during, and after workouts, I turbocharge fat burning, generate less inflammation, especially in the highly sensitive brain cells, which is why you feel fried the day after a tough workout. Less cellular destruction, less muscle soreness, faster recovery. Try Real Ketones' brand new product, Prime D+, a unique formula that combines the high-potency BHB salts with MCT oil to quickly get your body into sustained ketosis with no crash effect because MCT helps boost internal fat and ketone production. Go to bradkearns.com/shop, click the link and get 10% off forever. Learn more at realketones.com.